Welcome to the Alcohol-Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn to live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness. Welcome to the show. I am James Swanwick. What is the failure rate or the success rate of conventional treatments as it relates to alcohol addiction, food addiction, cocaine addiction? We're going to be finding that out and more in today's conversation. We are joined by one of the world's top experts on addictions. In fact, our guest today has been working in the addiction field since 1976, before there was any addiction recovery industry on the West Coast of the US, at least. She's incredibly familiar with, I guess some might say, the successes or failings of things like the 12-step program, traditional recovery, traditional treatments. And today we're going to put those traditional treatments under the microscope. Our guest today is Julia Ross, who is the author of 3 books, The Craving Cure, The Mood Cure, and The Diet Cure. Julia Ross is also the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute's virtual clinic and neuronutrient therapy training programs. Julia Ross, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to join you.
Tell us a little bit about your background working in the addiction field. You told me that you've been doing that since 1976. I can imagine you've seen a heck of a lot of changes over the years. So would you just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us, what you've seen since the 70s?
I'd be glad to. At the time that I was recruited as a graduate student to help create a program in the only existing residential alcoholism treatment program in San Francisco, a very large city. It's a beautiful place, a 4-story Victorian on a hill, but there was no program. It was, a shelter, place to sleep, a place to eat, a place to be away from alcohol, and a place to come back to after 12-step meetings. And the new director wanted more. He wanted something new, something to add to it, to give it more success, to give the residents some real structure and insight and hope. And we leaped at the opportunity to create the programming. I had a wonderful time, created a very, very rich program, much more intensive than anything that exists today. Plus, the program was long-term. People could stay as long as they wanted. When I first came to work there was somebody who'd been there for 6 years. But most people stayed between 1 and 2 years. And we created programs for their families so that they could start working things out before they went home, helping codependents, as we call them, with their own issues. It was just a very rich, exciting time. And in the meantime, the alcoholism treatment industry was moving into the area in general and was at that time entirely hospital-based. So the costs were tremendously high, but insurance, for some years paid for it. And what they did was to import the Minnesota model, which had been developed for some years and had about a 50% success rate with alcoholism in the Midwest. They adopted it for, all of their corporate programs, and increasingly privately owned residential programs cropped up that also adopted counseling programs to add to 12-step and residential structure. And that, as I say, had a 50% success rate, and all of us were dealing mostly with alcoholism at the time. But in the early 1980s, crack cocaine hit. So the epidemic, which is now in its 40 years raging still, basically showed us that all of our work, all of our techniques were useless. Across the country, all of us were reporting 100% relapse rates within 24 hours. And fortunately, we started hearing a voice calling in the wilderness, letting us know that the problem we were dealing with, the failure that we were dealing with, had to do with the fundamental cause of addiction, which is neurotransmitter deficit. So the brain is really the core of the problem. Not that other things don't contribute to it, psychological problems, financial problems, whatever, genetics contribute to it. But the real core of the problem, which gets worse over time when alcohol or any other substance is being used, makes it almost impossible to recover, because the brain doesn't recover without very specific help. And fortunately, some of the scientists, the neuroscientists, the brain scientists, were ready to talk about what help might be accessible to us. And one of them in particular, a PhD named Kenneth Blum, wrote a book called Alcohol and the Addictive Brain, where he talked about the fact that the 4 primary neurotransmitters that control our moods and our appetites were oftentimes all under functioning. And so the negative moods continued, and the need for substances to relieve them continued. And he introduced us to some very simple nutritional strategies, because it was well known in neuroscience that the brain was fueled by specific nutrients, just as every other tissue and function in the body is fueled. For example, muscle. The scientists who study muscle are very interested in what composes muscle. What are the nutrients that are needed to build muscle or repair muscle? So the same thing is true of the brain. And it was very well known at the time, at this point in the 1980s, that the nutrients that were needed are called amino acids, come from protein, and that there were only a handful required to repair this defective, malfunctioning brain chemistry. And so I began using it after conferring with colleagues in the Midwest and back east who had already started implementing it, finding it was successful. I already had a nutritionist on staff. She researched it, and we began using it. And the first week that we used it with a crack cocaine addict, we saw tremendous responsiveness.
Am I hearing you correctly that we can destroy much of the pain and suffering from these drug epidemics we have by simply eating the right nutritious foods?
Well, yes, but the deficiencies in the brain chemistry that result from addiction are quite deep. So we would have to be provided with a very strongly protein-based diet, protein 3 times a day, and protected from our cravings while the brain chemistry gradually built up. Instead, what the early neuroscientists discovered was that we could use supplements, concentrates of these 5 amino acids that were required to restore the brain, and that those took effect almost immediately. So that while they're getting their diet turned around and starting to eat more protein, they're already in the process of repairing whatever neurochemistry was malfunctioning.
So interesting. The 5 amino acids you referenced, what are those amino acids?
Well, let me start with the amino acid that enlightened me in the midst of the crack cocaine epidemic. We had a new client, highly motivated. He was still employed at the post office. His family was involved in the program. This is an intensive outpatient program we're talking about here. And he had already been to 5 other programs, some of them residential, some of them outpatient, and had been unable to sustain any degree of sobriety. And so we asked him whether he'd be willing to be a guinea pig, that we were starting something that was promising, that might give him something different than he'd ever had before. And he said, and we told him that it was amino acid supplements, it was a nutritional approach. And he said, oh, that'd be great, because I was a bodybuilder before I got into crack, and I took amino acids then. Bodybuilders typically do that to build up their muscles, which are also composed of amino acids. So we gave him one of the 5 amino acids that's needed, because when we're talking about stimulant addiction, whether it's cocaine or methamphetamine, there's only one part of the brain that's really impacted, and that's the part of the brain that naturally stimulates us, allows us to focus, gives us, that ability to be mentally alert and functional. And physically too, it programs muscle movement. So that part of the brain produces something called the catecholamines, which is a collection of neurotransmitters: dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline, which we all know. And all of them are fed by one amino acid, and it's called tyrosine. So we got him a bottle of tyrosine to take home, and he took it 3 times a day: morning, mid-morning, mid-afternoon. Didn't take it at night because he wanted to sleep, and it's stimulating. And we waited for a week. A week later, he came back and told us that it was the first week he had had in 5 years where he didn't use. No crack that week. And then he told us an incredible story, which was, he said, not only did I not use, but I passed the big test. The post office was trying to finally get rid of me, and they sent me on a 45-minute delivery with a driver who was my dealer, my drug dealer. This was all known, but they couldn't prove it, so they couldn't get rid of these guys on the job. But they were ready with a drug test for as soon as I got back, because they knew that I wouldn't be able to withstand this. And indeed, he said about 10 minutes into the drive, he pulled out a joint of crack cocaine with marijuana, which was this guy's favorite form of high. And I knew he said, I knew right then that I was done for, and that it was my family this was the last try for my family. I wouldn't have a job, that would be the end of my life. And then he said, and 5 minutes later, I realized that I'd forgotten that he had the joint in his pocket. Mm. I didn't need to have it, and I didn't have it, and I did the drug test, and I was clean. And we knew at that moment, that we had stumbled on something that was priceless. And so we continued to use the tyrosine with all of our crack cocaine addicts with great success. They were also having great success in other programs that were utilizing this new technology, basically, nutritional technology. And then we began to get familiar with the other amino acids that would correct other parts of the brain that someone, for example, who was an alcoholic, who was drinking to relax. Well, relaxation comes from another part of the brain, and it's produced by a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is available as a supplement. Yes. It's an amino acid as well as a neurotransmitter, and we began to use that for anyone for whom stress was a big primary motivator for drug or alcohol use. And again, we hit a different jackpot, a different part of the brain that needed correction to be functioning optimally. And the supplement of GABA, which is particularly only needed in very small amounts, provided it very quickly. We would send people home with the GABA. They would take it 3 or even 4 times a day because it could help with sleep. And again, we would get these incredible reports, with slashed cravings. And so that was 2 out of the 5.
Julia,
So,
just before you continue, may I just ask you to avoid touching the table when you speak? The sound
oh,
that you're
that's
making.
very hard for me to do because I'm not conscious of doing it. But you're not the first person who's asked, but I'll try.
Yeah, no
I'll
problem. It's just picks up on the microphone and it makes the listening experience a little bit compromised.
I can imagine.
Yeah, we've got tyrosine and we've got GABA. Yeah, GABA is amazing. I've taken GABA myself. It's a very calming supplement. And for those who've struggled with sleep, sometimes many people have found that taking some GABA has enabled them to fall asleep quicker and sleep deeper. I can just share that anecdotally. I wasn't aware of tyrosine, and I've since Googled it as you were talking there. Very interesting. So we've covered 2. We've got tyrosine and we've got GABA. And just for the listener, just a reminder, we're speaking with Julia Ross, who is the author of The Craving Cure, The Mood Cure, and The Diet Cure. And Julia has been working in the addiction field since 1976. What's the third amino acid, Julia?
Okay, so we have the amino acid tyrosine, which is perfect for someone who is using to get energy and enthusiasm and focus. We've talked about a natural tranquilizer, GABA, which is in order if someone is using for stress relief. So then there's another amino acid solution to the problem that drives the addiction to any substance that affects the opiates. So our natural opiate is endorphin, and that's our natural pleasure, comfort, joy chemistry, pain killing, very potent. But when the levels drop too low, we need help from something else. Alcohol can definitely bring some temporary comfort and joy because, among other things, it affects the endorphin levels and raises them up temporarily. But obviously, opiates, any kind of actual painkiller, THC can be quite potent on the endorphin function. So the final and really the biggest killer that thrives on endorphin relief is sugar. So comfort foods are acting on the endorphin receptors in the brain to temporarily give us that sense of comfort. Some of our clients call their bread or their ice cream or whatever their best friend, just as people call alcohol, quite often. So the amino acid that helps to retain and build up our natural endorphin stores is called D-phenylalanine. The letter D, phenylalanine. So it's available in 2 different formulations, D-phenylalanine and another mixed formulation called DL-phenylalanine, which is a little more stimulating. At any rate, we get the same kind of dramatic results with that when we have somebody who's drinking alcohol to kill pain, whether physical or emotional, or eating toxic foods to get a similar effect. And the same kind of reports that we get on the other 2 amino acids come flooding in when people are responding about their need for comfort food that's suddenly gone, their need for pain killing, whether it's from alcohol or drugs, is really reduced. So that makes 3.
Is that commonly referred to as DLPA in a supplement form?
There's DPA and DLPA.
Got it. So DPA and DLPA.
And they're a little harder to find, but all of these things are available on Amazon.
Yeah, I just Googled it right now on Amazon actually, and I can see them available here. I can see DLPA and I can see uh, phenyl.
L-phenylalanine. But are you
Yeah.
seeing D-phenylalanine?
I'm seeing DL and I'm seeing DLPA powder.
But you
Let's
haven't found the DPA by itself. So I can give you a couple of companies that make it. One is called Montiff, Montiff,
hmm
and there's another one, Doctor's Best,
Okay. Okay, got it.
which is much cheaper. Works fine.
Okay, very good. So we've got tyrosine, GABA, DPA, and DLPA, which is number three. And we're working down these five amino acids here. What's the fourth one?
Well, the fourth one um, has to do with the supply of glucose to the neurotransmitters. So the brain is responsible for keeping these neurotransmitters going by supplying glucose at every moment of every day. And particularly when our diet isn't good, whether we're not eating enough or we're eating too much sugar and starch so that our blood sugar spikes and then drops too low, the supply to the neurotransmitters reduces and people start feeling that neurotransmitter deficiency, um, depression, anxiety, stress, cravings. Um, and that situation certainly needs a dietary solution. We got to take in real food, not sugar and starch, uh, throughout the day, at least 3 times a day. But there is an instant solution as well, and that is one of the most researched amino acids there is, of all 20 that exist. It's called glutamine. And
hmm
glutamine has many, many extraordinary healing properties. But the thing that's so important with alcoholism and sugar addiction is that it is intended to very instantly and sensitively convert into glucose if the cells are in trouble, if the glucose supply drops. And people can feel it. It tastes good actually, and they take it sublingually, and almost instantly the craving reduces. They feel balanced and level and not stressed and uh, having trouble focusing and irritable and so forth. Um, so that's another, really important one for the alcoholic
Yeah,
who needs some relief.
glutamine. Yeah, supplies it, so it helps support the supply of glucose to the brain neurotransmitters.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, we're up to the number five here, Julia. We've got tyrosine, GABA, DPA, and DLPA. We've got glutamine. What's the fifth amino acid here?
Well, um, I'm blanking. Can you turn this off for a second? Uh,
No problems at all.
this has never happened before,
That's all right.
fortunately.
I'm at the 23:40 mark. That's fine.
What am I leaving out? Oh, the one I usually start with. This is our natural antidepressant, the neurotransmitter called serotonin. Probably the best known of all of the brain neurotransmitters, because there are so many drugs now marketed to increase the function of serotonin in the brain. And people are pretty clear that the drug effect is almost always only partial, that you never get the complete repair. But the nutrient that is directly used by the serotonin producing cells is tryptophan, the amino acid tryptophan.
Mm.
And tryptophan is, again, available at, all health food stores. And there is a second form of it called 5-hydroxytryptophan, or 5-HTP, which works better for some people. About 80% of people do equally well on both in terms of relieving depression, that kind of negative, pessimistic thinking, hopelessness, irritability, anxiety, phobias. There's a sleeplessness. There's a wide range of deficiency symptoms with serotonin, longer than any other neurotransmitter deficiency, because out of tryptophan, then we get serotonin, and serotonin produces not only sunny moods, but it turns into melatonin, which is our sleep
Yes.
provider.
Yeah, and you can get a lot of tryptophan on Thanksgiving Day because everyone's eating a turkey, and there's lots of tryptophan in turkey. So people, I think, mistakenly believe that they're tired because they're eating large quantities of food. I would propose that most of the reason they feel tired is because they're eating turkey, which has got large amounts of tryptophan, right, Julia?
Well, yes, but the truth is that any animal protein contains tryptophan in pretty good amounts, as opposed to plant proteins. So, for example, there's a lot of use of protein powders now, and we've been concerned because only whey protein provides adequate tryptophan. The plants tend not to have much, if any. So peas are probably the best source in the plant protein powder category, but you'll notice that even collagen protein powders have almost no tryptophan. And there's been some concern among bodybuilders who have noticed becoming more depressed using high amounts of plant protein powders.
Yes.
And that when they switch to whey, they get better mood.
So I take it then you're a meat eater.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why. I think that I've just explained that of the three kinds of foods, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, it's the proteins that are the most important for neurotransmitter repair. And we just can't get concentrated protein from, for example, beans. It takes a huge amount of legume to equal the amount of a single chicken breast, for example. So people it's hard for them to eat enough of the, whole legumes, lentils, beans, and so forth, or whole grains, which have a smaller amount but still do have protein. So
it's interesting. An additional thought there. Some years ago, I was in a romantic relationship with a woman who was not a meat eater, and we would cook together, and most of her cooking was legumes and beans and lentils. And I had 3 gout attacks that year, and I came to find out subsequently, I didn't realize this until some years later, that my uric acid levels were extraordinarily high because those foods, lentils and beans, example, create a lot of purines in the body, which rises the uric acid content. And our hypothesis, subsequently was that it was that high. It was that change in diet where I was eating a lot of that stuff that gave me gout attacks. And a lot of people say, well, you get gout attacks from drinking too much alcohol or for eating too much meat. I don't drink alcohol at all, so it couldn't have been the alcohol that was giving me the gout attacks.
and
I
it couldn't
wasn't
have been
eating,
meat.
and it could not have been meat either, because my meat consumption dropped to maybe meat once every week or two, and then subsequently I've switched back to meat based, and I actually have taken, candidly, a prescription drug in addition to eating meat, which is the first time that I've actually surrendered to, okay, give me a prescription drug, which is called allopurinol. and allopurinol drops uric acid in the body, and my uric acid levels have dropped noticeably, and I have not had a gout attack. Now, I am open to feedback from anyone who could tell me what the consequences are of taking such a drug, but certainly I seemed to be unable to prevent gout attacks from diet alone, and that was a eye-opening experience for me, because I always used to think I was Superman and I could fix everything with just strong dietary choices. But on this occasion, I decided to experiment, tried this drug called allopurinol, and so far it's done wonders, because I actually have measured my allopurinol levels. I'm sorry, my uric acid levels. My uric acid levels went from extraordinarily high, 8.8, and almost overnight dropped down. It's not overnight, I'm sorry. I think 40 days, 45 days or so, it dropped down to the fives, which is a much healthier range. Anyway, I'm sorry I inserted my side story into what you were sharing, Julia, but I don't know if you've got any thoughts
Well,
on what I.
I just wanted to be clear. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. Uh, your uric acid levels continued to be high even when you went back to meat.
Yes,
So you eliminated the legumes altogether?
yes,
Okay. The reason I'm asking is that one of the ways that we help people personalize their diets is to find out what their blood type is. And we've found that the two major blood types, type O and type A, um, really do program in differences in tolerance for food.
mine's
Do
an
you know
O,
what your blood type is?
O
Yeah.
positive. Yeah,
So O's it's O for original. It's the original blood type. It's basically, the Paleolithic blood type.
yeah,
And at the time of its origination, we were eating Paleolithic foods. We were
yes,
eating meat and whatever, roots, fruits, nuts and seeds, and vegetables were available, since we were not cultivating anything. So uh, that's still true. And people with an O blood type do not seem to be able to break down the more recent foods like legumes and whole grains that were
yeah,
cultivated starting about 20 to 30,000 years ago, at which point the A blood type originated, which was adapted to what I call the herder planter diet. So they still had animals that they were eating, but they were growing their own plants, and not depending on the seasonal availability.
yes,
And what we found with them is that, yes, they tolerate the more modern foods like whole grains and legumes well, but they don't make adequate hydrochloric acid to break down red meat in particular.
mm,
And because their hydrochloric acid level tends to be lower, they're more vulnerable to disease because they don't kill the bugs in the stomach uh, as effectively as O's do. And so typically we give them some combination of hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes in something called super enzymes. And then they're able to eat anything and protect their health at the same time. And so, we're always looking for ways to help people identify what for them is the right diet, not what's the fad at the moment, but what's for them the right diet. And so for you, we would know right away that you and your girlfriend would have to eat differently, and
yeah.
probably could have spared you the problem with gout. I don't know why it hasn't gone away. We have not had to deal with gout in our clinic. We have a
Well,
virtual clinic.
my gout attacks reduced subsequently and noticeably when I returned to a meat diet, but it certainly wasn't eliminated. But where I had four in a year, it went back to one every 18 months subsequently. And then since I've been on the allopurinol, nothing's happened. I haven't had any problems. And I actually, anecdotally, I'm not sure if I can ever prove this, but one of the gout attacks came after I ate a considerable number of anchovies on a pizza one night. I had a pizza and anchovies. And then the next day I had a gout attack, and I came to realize with subsequent research that anchovies have the highest amounts of purines in it, which can then can spike the uric acid levels very quickly, which can lead to a
Fascinating,
gout
because there
attack.
probably wasn't very much on a
No,
pizza.
well, I mean, I have a big appetite, Julia.
Uh,
I had a big family-sized pizza by myself, and there were at least three anchovies on each one of those slices. But I think it was enough to cause a gout attack, And
yeah,
so,
clearly.
but I thankfully I have my blood work done now every quarter, at least every maybe 4 or 5 months now, and my uric acids are way low now. And also, just a side note, since I've been eating. I eat considerable amounts of red meat now, or at least I have the past year. I've been eating a 450-gram piece of grass-fed steak 4 times a week for about, let's call it 6 months or so. My testosterone levels have gone over 1,000, and which is incredible. And I put it down to a combination of things: sunlight, exercise, good sleep, doing heavy uh, weights in the gym, but also I would probably submit increasing my steak, grass-fed steak consumption. But anyway, we don't need to make this a James Swanwick dietary investigation. We're talking about helping folks who are trying to reduce and stop drinking, what they can do with, it sounds like supplementation, which let's just review that. And then I'd like to ask how we can get those same amino acids from food. If we were not going to go to Amazon and buy these supplements, how can we get them from food? But first of all, let's just review it if we may. The 5 amino acids that you were referencing are tyrosine, which helps the neurotransmitters for focus; GABA, which obviously reduces stress; DPA and DLPA, which helps to retain natural endorphins; glutamine, which helps supply glucose to the brain; and then tryptophan, or 5-HTP, which helps create serotonin. And all of those things you're submitting, Julia, if someone was to increase those amino acids either by supplementation or by food, which we'll get to in a second, can help reduce people's cravings for alcohol. That's what you're putting forward, yes?
Yes. Initially, we would give the recommendation and wait a week to get a report, on the effectiveness. And then we would, alter doses if we needed to, raise them or lower them or whatever. But after a few years, we decided to do trials of amino acids in the office in our virtual clinic. And so we would send a trialing kit to people. We still do this. And then we would meet with them on Zoom, and they would open the capsule in their mouth, swish it around in their mouths for just a minute or so, and then start reporting in on any changes that they noticed. And the longest we ever had to wait was probably 4 minutes. Usually the effects are obvious within 2 minutes. And this became, just an instant feedback. Is this good for you? Is this right for you? What's the dose for you? And so when we made our recommendations for daily use for, for adults, alcoholic adults, to be 6 months to a year, that they would continue to need the supplements in addition to building up the quality of their diet and the amount of protein in it. So that was, a huge advance in their motivation, because they could see instantly, yes. And eventually, just recently, last few years, I've been posting on my YouTube channel interviews of volunteers who try the aminos and then are filmed and describe, in real time, what their responses are.
So these amino acids can have almost instantaneous effect.
Yes.
That's incredible, isn't it? I would have thought that you would have needed like a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day protocol, but just changing it that quickly can have, it seems, almost instantaneous results.
The way I discovered this was an alcoholic who, Native American, He was brought in by the staff of the tribal clinic because he had relapsed so many times. He'd gone to very elaborate, beautiful Native American run residential treatment programs, and within 3 days, which is their standard experience, he would be drinking again. And so they brought him down to my clinic, and they brought a camera. They wanted to record the process, and his counselor was there, and the head of the clinic was there, and he was there, and he was so depressed that he couldn't talk. So I couldn't introduce him. I couldn't get any information from him other than what he looked like and his inability to talk. And they said, well, yeah, we've had that problem too. Anyway, so we decided to give it to him, and we knew that sublingual absorption was faster than if he swallowed a capsule. So we just asked him to open the capsule in his mouth and swish the water. And this is true of all Native Americans we've ever worked with. Almost instant and very vivid response. His eyes started to track. He started to get restless and move around in his chair, and he was able to talk. And so I could proceed, and that amino acid was tyrosine. And in fact, alcohol had a very energizing, enlivening effect on him. And that's what he was needing. With somebody else, it would have to be cocaine or meth, to get you moving. But with him, and a lot of alcoholics, wouldn't you agree, drink to get lively and fun? And
Yes.
so that was my lesson in how quickly the amino acids could take effect. We'd only use them as capsules that people took when they went home. Up until
So
then.
if this is, and just for the listener, I want to make sure I do get to the foods that we can eat to naturally boost these amino acids. If this is what you're seeing and experiencing, why are the traditional methodologies of recovery, prevention, helping people out of addiction, why are those amino acids not put forward so prominently, and we're stuck seemingly in these traditional methods which by all accounts still have an appallingly low success rate?
Well, I'd like to answer that question with the answer that I was given by the director of one of these hospital-based treatment programs in the Bay Area. I was leaving after 14 years, the agency in San Francisco, and I was moving to the adjacent county and opening my own private program, which focused on the use of nutrition and supplementation, in addition to all the other things that were helpful. And the director of this hospital program, which had the standard treatment model, still used today, took me out to lunch and said, I wanted to share with you the things that have made us successful and that I was trained to do to keep the census up. And so the first thing that I want to suggest to you, although I will deny that I ever said this if you ever tell anyone, is to do not create a strong aftercare program. Usually people make great connections. They love their fellow, sufferers in the programs. They love the staff, and they will come back if they get in trouble. But if they don't get in trouble, they won't come back. And so our biggest population of clients is relapsers. And we can't get relapsers unless we reduce the quality of our program.
Wow.
And subsequently, I've had former colleagues who went to work in some of these, really large corporate businesses, that have bought up many treatment programs, and they've said the same thing. I've said to them, how effective the aminos are. You use them yourself when I knew you way back. Why why can't you be persuasive to get them integrated, at least a pilot program, something? And she said the same thing. She said it would be too effective.
It's an example of much of the criticism that many have about the US healthcare system, which is focused on, well, let's just say it's not focused on prevention, is it? It's focused on helping people who are already sick rather than preventing them from getting sick in the first place. There's no money in prevention when you compare it to, or there's little money in prevention compared to trying to, support someone who's already suffering.
You bring up another point when you say that. Another problem is that so many people who work in these programs have been able to stay sober themselves. And so if someone relapses, they judge them. They don't really understand that it's a biochemical imperative, that addiction is, by definition, a willpower killer. It's a biochemical barrier that is tremendously powerful and it really insuperable for most people. That's why my most recent book is called The Craving Cure, and it's targeted towards food addiction, which is the same dynamic. People cannot stop eating the foods that are making them obese and diabetic. They want to, they need to, they're smart, they're motivated. Food addicts are typically pretty stable in their lifestyle, but they can't because it's a biochemical imperative. And it's only a biochemical solution that can provide the solution to the biochemical core of the problem. All the other things in treatment are great, but it's just missing this understanding that allows us to have compassion for people who are addicted.
How do we get these amino acids from food, Julia?
Well, it's these amino acids are only available in foods that contain protein. So there's currently sort of a romance with what are called plant-based diets. Well, sugar is a plant. Chocolate is a plant. Wheat is a plant. Sugar, starch, chocolate. The fundamentals of the junk food diet, are all plants. There is no reason to be romantic about it. We've got to be realistic. And the reality is that we have been eating animal protein on this planet for 2 million years. We are animals and we are omnivores, meaning we need both animal and plant foods. It's not a popular statement of fact, but we see people who really want to be vegan for, really admirable reasons. Who wants to kill anything, and then eat it? It's a disgusting concept, but we are animals and we have to have the same compassion for ourselves as we have with our dogs, or cats. So at any rate, the amount and the number of amino acids is greater in animal protein. So there are 20 amino acids. 9 of them are essential. In other words, they can't be made out of anything else. And one of them, tryptophan, is extremely hard to get except in animal protein. And I believe that's why the depression epidemic started, was because we stopped eating the same amount of animal protein that we had in the 1970s when we became terrified of fat, and animal protein contains saturated fat. So there was a mistaken idea that saturated fat was the cause of heart disease, and we went towards carbs, and our protein consumption as well as our fat consumption went down. But then the fat increased because we were eating vegetable source fats instead of saturated fats. And there are problems with that. But we're sort of left with this blank area where nobody really wants to talk about protein. They talk about plants, which are primarily carbohydrate and fiber, and fat. If there's a keto diet, but even with keto diets, there's very little attention typically brought to bear on our need for protein. But because amino acids are critical for recovering people, we have been looking at this need for concentrated protein in the food 3 times a day. And we always found that if people eat animal protein 3 times a day, the amounts may differ, that their recovery is faster and stronger.
So if I'm going to the restaurant tonight and I've got a choice of grass-fed steak, chicken, salmon, vegetables, potatoes, I'm not going to include fries and carbs, right? I'm just going to say like stuff that is all source of protein, and then there's some vegetables. What is the best meal that I could order to help my neurotransmitters, which in turn would help reduce or eliminate cravings that I might experience? What's the Rolls Royce of dinner meals, Julia?
We found that it really is a matter of taste and of blood type. So a type A would typically choose chicken or fish because they digest them better. A type O typically likes beef and digests it magnificently. So in terms of difference in quality, we haven't really noticed that. Quantity and what the individual impulse is. And we've noticed that with blood types, that that's a very good way to help people understand their own inclinations when it comes to eating.
So if you're an O blood type like I am, you're probably going to have a desire for beef, and if you're an A, you might favor chicken and fish. And then vegetables, all vegetables created equally, or are there some that you would avoid, Julia?
I haven't noticed that anyone needs particular guidance on vegetables. Fruits, it's mostly the amount. They can become addictive because they contain high fructose corn syrup. Essentially, their own free fructose is found in fruit, and so they can become addictive. And if you've already been addicted to alcohol, you're a little more you're significantly more apt to become addicted to carbs in sobriety. So starches, fruits, sugars, and so forth.
One of the things that our clients share with us when they stop drinking alcohol and they're going through our stop drinking process is that they start craving sugary foods. And some of those examples are ice cream and chocolate. What's going on there that's having them crave that, and how would you treat that?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, it's really important to know what they crave. Because some of them will say, well, anything sweet. But a lot of them, as you say, have specific weaknesses, they would say, or habits. And when it's milk-based sugar, like ice cream, or a grain-based treat, like cookies, bread, whatever, and chocolate, all those three have a particular effect on the brain, and specifically on the brain's pleasure centers, the endorphin function. So they plug into the endorphin receptors. Instead of having endorphin plugged in, we've got the molecules of gluten, of casein in the case of milk, of chocolate, some of the components of chocolate. And so people get dependent on them, and they know when endorphin levels drop, and they've been using alcohol for that. Alcohol isn't available anymore. They don't know that they can quickly support their own endorphin production with supplements. and with a adequate protein diet. And so they turn to the drug foods that target the endorphin receptors.
So the way or the sweets or the desserts or the treats to consume in place of the ice cream or the chocolate or the sweets would be what you would submit?
Well, our goal is to eliminate any need for treats, really.
Yes. Yes.
And because of the supplements, that's conceivable. Just as our crack cocaine addict forgot about the fact that his dealer buddy had a joint of caviar in his
Yes.
pocket. Same thing with the ice cream in the freezer. You just
Yeah.
forget about it. It's not screaming at you when your own pleasure chemistry is in operation.
Yes. I have one example though if someone is craving something when I want to run by you and get your opinion on it. 0% fat Greek yogurt.
Oh, uh, well, Greek yogurt is interesting because it does have a fair amount of protein in it. But when someone is addicted, so is it sweetened?
No, I choose the 0% fat, unsweetened Greek yogurt.
Unsweetened.
And then
Okay.
I put some blueberries in there. And sometimes I'll put a dollop, that's apparently that's the word dollop, a dollop of raw honey in it and stir it around.
Okay. So
That's the way that I consume it.
that's your workaround from ice cream. So
Yes.
you've got the dairy high plugging into the endorphin receptor from the casein in the milk in the yogurt, and then you've got some high fructose content in the blueberries and definitely in the honey, so that you're getting the sugar high in terms of neurochemistry as well. So you've got dairy and sugar. Some people, the dairy doesn't do a thing for them, but to have a piece of whole grain bread with a lot of jam on it, that would be their kick.
Mm. For me, I've just eliminated the consumption of ice cream. I don't remember the last time I ate ice cream.
But you've
I can,
substituted it.
yes, and I can get a 450-gram tub of Greek yogurt, which will give me 35 grams at least of protein, and there's only 350 calories in that thing. And so for me, I'm like, that's a protein bomb. And as it relates to the blueberries, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, are very low on the glycemic index. Very
Oh, they
low.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's something.
Yeah, of course there's something. But for me, it's like a 450-gram tub of Greek yogurt where I'm getting 35 grams of protein, only 350 calories, and I'm throwing some blueberries in there. I'm thinking that's greater than 2 scoops of ice cream that I might have with high sugar content. Am I wrong?
Oh,
Am I
it's
mistaken?
it's it's much superior to ice cream, but you're defending your addiction. The
That's
fact
funny.
is,
Well, in
fact
actual
is
fact,
that you want it and only it over and over and over and over. So there's
yeah,
an addiction component, uh, and you're asking me what could it be, and I'm saying a combination of for some people the casein addiction is really quite potent.
mm,
The specific protein, not the sugar in dairy products, although there is, of course, lactose, but
mm,
the protein plugs into the endorphin receptor. And then
mm.
if you add honey, then you're getting definitely high fructose. It's about 50% high fructose syrup in honey.
Mm. You just gave me a wonderful marketing idea for our stop drinking services. I can just we in marketing world we say hook, the hook, which is the first thing that you'd say out of your mouth if you're on a video ad, and it is stop defending your addiction.
And a
Yeah.
big picture of an ice cream bowl or whatever.
Well, in this case, it'll be stop defending your addiction to alcohol. Oh, I don't drink that much. I only drink on weekends.
Oh,
Oh, but
good. Yeah.
everyone does it, et cetera, et cetera. So you've given me a great video marketing hook to record, Julia. Thank you very much. I am conscious of time. We've been going almost 1 hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. And I know we
Thank
started
you.
a little bit late as well. So, Julia,
I
thank
would
you.
like to say one thing in response to what you just said.
Mm.
That the other thing is, if you stop defending your addiction, what are you left with? You're left with shame. I can't control it. It's bad, but I keep doing it. And with the absolute knowledge of the neurotransmitter control of our brain and our appetites, we can honestly say that they are helpless, and that it isn't their fault. I get like dozens of obese people coming through the program. Did they choose to be obese? Absolutely not. They are helpless. And the reason I can be absolutely certain about that is that I see them give up the obesogenic foods overnight when their brain is corrected. So that the fact that you already include an understanding of brain chemistry in your program is very impressive. And I think that it's one of the something that you could expand on to actually tell people why. Why are you doing this? Is it because you're a loser? You're stupid? No. You're
Thank
a
you so
victim
much.
of a malfunctioning brain.
Yes. And then also not only a victim of a malfunctioning brain, but a victim of traditional treatments not articulating this particular methodology. And in many cases, probably for corporate and capitalist reasons. We were speaking to Julia Ross, who is the author of the book The Craving Cure, also The Mood Cure and The Diet Cure, and the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute's virtual clinic and neuronutrient therapy training programs. Please do check out her books online. That's The Craving Cure, The Mood Cure, and The Diet Cure. Julia Ross, thank you so much for bringing your guidance and expertise to this conversation today. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome, James. All the best to you.